She sparkled. She bedazzled. To say that my mother, Jean Lumb, was one of a kind is an understatement. She was renowned as a champion of dynamic energy who fought for gender and ethnic equality and advocated for self-representation of Chinese Canadians. She was the go-to person and interpreter of Chinese thoughts, feelings, and needs, bridging that space, that huge space that existed at that time between Chinese Canadians and the community outside of Chinatown. Where did it all begin? She was born into a close-knit family with 12 siblings. And at that time, it was really very rare because the ratio of Chinese men to women was 10-1. Now, my grandfather, Jean's father, arrived in 1899. And a few years later, he was one of the few Chinese men at the time who was able to bring over his wife, my grandmother. So again, having this family in 1919, when my mother was born, eventually having 12 brothers and sisters was a rare occurrence. Life for any Chinese living in the sleepy town of Nanaimo, BC, where my mother was born, or any other place in Canada was challenging. In BC alone, there were over 100 anti-Chinese policies and laws that barred, segregated, and restricted the Chinese in Canada. It was Jean's humble beginnings and her sense of feeling outside the circle of Canadian life that paved the way for her future as a woman of many firsts.
My mother had 11 children in Canada, and I'm number 6 of the family of 12. I got put into grade 4, and then I skipped, and I got into grade 6, and then next thing you know, I was 12 years old. And as much as I loved going to school, there was a change in the family plan. One of my sisters got married, and it was during the Depression, and my father thought that I should leave school and go to work. Chinese family, of course. As father said, the boys need the education because they have to make a living to look after their family. Girls get married, and their husbands would have to look after you. So therefore, education to the girl is not as important as the boys. When I was told to quit school, I cried. And my father said to my mother, I didn't know Jean was going to take it so hard. So my father came in and talked to me. He said, Jean, I know it's very hard on you, but you don't worry. After school, you can learn from your brother's homework. For the Chinese school, I'll teach you at home. And I learned more from him in Chinese than my brothers and sisters did. We lived in a Chinatown area where we don't see anybody else except Chinese people. That we weren't allowed almost to go downtown where the white people were. I had to go to a segregated school, which I was not happy at all. So I think in those days, I felt I was out there, looking in on the playground, that I feel that I'm not in there. So there seemed to be a circle that's keeping me out. And I said, I wish one day that I would be inside the circle instead of being out here. I said, maybe if I had blonde hair and a different, my face could be a little more white, I could go to those schools, and I only wish that once, that I wasn't from my father and my mother's family, that I had blonde hair. But just for that once little while, I felt that, wouldn't it be nice if I was a blonde and I can go to these schools and be inside the circle instead of outside the circle.
At age 16, during the Great Depression in the 30s, Jean was sent by her parents to work for her married sister in Toronto. And when Jean arrived in Toronto, there was such a small Chinese community, only about 2,000. Chinatown was located downtown in what was called St. John's Ward, or the Ward. A few women and only a dozen or so families made up a disproportionately male population, the result of the head taxes that discouraged Chinese immigration from 1885 until 1923, and the subsequent exclusionary law that outright banned Chinese immigrants from 1923 until 1947. The ratio of men to women was 18-1. And for someone from a huge, loving family, Jean was dismayed by the absence of family life. Her wedding to my father, Doyle Lumb, a few years later in 1939, resulted in the loss of her citizenship, another example of Canada's harsh laws. Even though she was born in Canada, she had to take on her husband's official status. And because my father was born in China, he was classified as alien. Decades later, the tide turned and came full circle. Jean regained her citizenship and was later appointed a citizenship judge who administered the oath of citizenship to hundreds of new Canadians. World War II was a really huge turning point in Chinese Canadian history. After the war, the Chinese gained the right to vote across Canada, and with that right to vote, they could now run for public office and enter in professions like medicine and law. The exclusionary law was repealed in 1947. However, there remained so many restrictions that prevented the Chinese from bringing their wives and children to Canada. Jean fought to bring more changes to ease family reunification. As the only female who was directed by the male delegates to sit at the back and be quiet as a mouse, she ended up being the spokesperson at a meeting with Prime Minister John Diefenbaker. In her words, "When we got there, Fun Sin, the official spokesperson, was seated next to Mr. Diefenbaker. But Mr. Diefenbaker insisted that I sit next to him, since I was the only woman delegate. Mr. Diefenbaker had one bad ear, the one next to Wong Fun Sin. So every time Fun Sin read from the brief, Mr. Diefenbaker would ask me what he said. Since I knew that brief inside out, I explained to him what had just been said." The questions from the floor were mostly directed to me, because of the fact that I was a woman and the issue was family reunion. I feel very lucky that I had the opportunity to be out front as an official spokesperson. Women have always had to be too much in the background. Jean continued to make great strides for her community. She served as the president of numerous Chinese women's groups, trustee for a Chinese school, and only female member of the Chinese Community Centre of Ontario. After New City Hall was opened in 1965, at the expense of 2/3 of Chinatown being demolished, Jean headed the Save Chinatown Committee to ward off further expropriation. What was left of Chinatown was saved. The Kwang Chow, the restaurant that my parents owned in Chinatown, attracted well-known diners from prime ministers and politicians to movie stars. There, Jean built a network of distinguished and influential clientele who helped seal her position as the unofficial mayor of Chinatown. She raised awareness about her community, breaking labels and stereotypes portrayed and perpetuated by the public, media, and elected officials. The once marginalized Chinatown became a popular destination rather than an area to avoid. This banquet at the Kwang Chow restaurant was attended by Mayor Nathan Phillips, Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, learning how to use chopsticks, and Member of Parliament Roland Michener, later appointed the Governor General of Canada. As another way to introduce Chinese culture to the larger community, Jean established a Chinese dance troupe. Performances around the city and across Canada culminated in a command performance for Queen Elizabeth II on the occasion of Canada's centennial celebration on Parliament Hill in 1967. So as if running a restaurant, raising 6 children, and managing a dance troupe were not enough. Despite the cultural tides of the times, she extended her volunteerism outside her community, breaking glass ceilings in a line of many firsts. First Chinese woman on the boards of Women's College Hospital, Mount Sinai Hospital, University Settlement House, and the Rotary Lachlan Centre. And she was also the first woman and first Chinese Canadian to receive the Fran Deck Award for Outstanding Achievement in Toronto's restaurant industry. She was inducted into the Order of Canada as the first Chinese Canadian woman and first restaurateur ever in 1976. After decades of tireless pioneering, my mother died in 2002 at the age of 82. Her lifelong work on behalf of her community gave voice to the injustices of racism and discrimination. The ups and downs in the life of a small town girl from Nanaimo transformed her into a larger-than-life woman whose childhood dream of being inside the circle was realized. Driven by her passion and commitment to make a difference, Jean gave a voice for the voiceless, speaking up, telling untold stories, and creating a new narrative from a Chinese person's perspective to help her community fully and equally participate in Canadian life. Her legacy lives on through our family, the Jean Lumb Foundation that awards high school students of Chinese heritage from across Canada, a commemorative provincial plaque that is situated in our first Chinatown, about a block south of where the Huangchao restaurant was, the Jean Lumb Lane that runs south off Dundas in West Chinatown, and the Jean Lumb Public School, the highest honor that pays tribute to her lifelong commitment to education. She is remembered and respected for her intelligence, leadership, and strength of character, for building bridges, dismantling barriers, and advocating for an inclusive country. The power of one voice can be a transformative agent of change. Jean Lumb has taken her rightful place as a Canadian who made a difference.